People know that this sound is always followed by trouble. In Japan, it heralds a tsunami. In Hawaii, a volcanic eruption. But here on the coast, the signal usually means only one thing. If you go back in time and ask the most ordinary 15th century European if they're afraid of sharks, well, a shark? I don't know any sharks. And have you seen wolves, by the way? Before humans began actively exploring the seas and oceans, only sailors and fishermen probably knew about bloodthirsty monsters. Everyone else had their own monsters that were constantly trying to devour them. It wasn't until the 20th century, with the release of a book and then a horror movie of the same name, that the whole planet suddenly went crazy with the terror of sharks. I'm talking about Jaws. But it's not just Spielberg, of course. Sharks bite all too often. Yeah, pretty much everything. A human? A boat? A surfboard? They don't care how edible it is. They just want to bite. Many people couldn't survive an encounter with sharks, but surfer Mick Fanning got lucky. While he was competing in South Africa, a great white shark got right next to him. It yanked the guy by the rope tied to his leg. Then the surfer was knocked off his board, and he ended up under a wave.
You can see a little splash. Oh.
Imagine for a second the terror the guy felt. Mick fought back as hard as he could, punched the shark several times, and thought it would bite him. But for some reason it didn't. The very same white shark, the menace of sailors and characters from the movie Jaws, only bit through the rope and scared everyone who was watching. Soon help arrived, scared the predator away, and that was it. Yeah, it all ended well. It might seem strange. Why didn't the shark even hurt Mick? I mean, I'm certainly very glad, but what about the reputation of this bloodthirsty monster? It feels like the predator was just playing with the man, like seagulls play with various objects for fun. But this is not an orca tossing its prey, and yet there's an explanation. Most of the sharks that have ever attacked humans weren't going to eat them at all. They just wanted to, well, study them. Okay, I agree it sounds strange when human pays with their life for a shark's interest, but that's how sharks learn about the world around them. They don't have paws, so they can't touch an unknown creature or object, and some species don't have very good eyesight, so they can only bite. Most often it's a light exploratory bite, which can cause bleeding and a bunch of other side effects up to the death of the person. Usually one bite is enough for sharks to know that it's not tasty, but it can be enough for a human as well, so seriously, you better stay away from sharks. Wait a minute, but if the shark isn't hungry, why would it ever swim any closer to an unknown creature? The answer is curiosity. Anything out of the ordinary and new can be frightening, or it can be intensely interesting. Remember the Max Headroom incident with the TV signal interception? Back then, people were shocked by what happened. Now imagine that if every person in the shark's path is the same incident. It just can't help but check out a strange something that is too out of place of its worldview. Plus, humans are often upright in the water, which is unusual for animals, another reason to check them out. But how is it that sharks have become so cautious? And instead of just eating humans, they started gently biting them. I have some thoughts on this. Many sharks are predators that can eat anyone. For millions of years, they've been able to prey on anything in the water because there was hardly anything floating out there except for edible things. Fish or other sea creatures, sharks could just open their mouth and eat. And then people got in the way of sharks. They started launching boats, and huge chunks of wood clearly didn't make it into the shark's menu. Probably even caused a few deaths. It's just a guess, but what if humans once unwittingly cheated the sharks? And now the predators are forced to taste their food carefully before swallowing it.
Okay, the sharks are eating something.
What?
The sharks are eating something.
No one knows what really happened, but there's more scientific evidence. Predatory shark species from birth have a special mission: to control the balance of other animals in the ocean, to get rid of the weak and sick, to reduce the population so that some species doesn't breed too much. And it's a job you can't just give up.
Frankie, I can do this!
In the animal kingdom, any disruption of the food chain, a lack of control over the population of any species, leads to frightening consequences. Have you ever heard of the mouse plague?
Do that!
They say it's not even unusual for Australia to have rodent infestations. Mice breed at a frightening rate when the drought ends. They seize the day, you know? Whoa, wait a second. But if sharks only bite people for research purposes and aren't going to eat us at all, how do you explain the existence of man-eating sharks? Yes, sometimes nature fails a little bit, and individuals order food that isn't on their menu, sort of like an exception. But try explaining that to people. Okay, it might seem to you that one drop of human blood is enough to attract all the sharks within a few miles. But in fact, sharks don't even like the smell of humans. They don't go after someone who happens to start bleeding. It's strange, but evolution has made many predators picky eaters. The smell of tuna or cow seems much nicer to sharks, and they would need the right current to smell blood from a distance. Besides, no shark is going to go straight for its prey, like Roquefort from Chip 'n Dale went for the cheese. Oh, by the way, how can you even smell anything in the water? It turns out no worse than in air. Only here, it's not the oxygen molecules that are responsible for the diffusing. Otherwise, there's almost no difference. Let's say smells are easy, but what about the propagation of sound? Anyone who has ever put their head underwater knows that the acoustics there are incredibly cool, but it only seems that way. In 1997, scientists recorded the loudest and most mysterious sound ever documented. They immediately thought about huge mythical monsters living in the depths and secret military drills. Well, what else could have been the source of this? Only years later was it possible to find out that it was the sound of an ice quake. A huge iceberg broke off an Antarctic glacier with a terrifying rumble, and ancient monsters had nothing to do with it, unless they chewed it off. But in general, the distribution of sound in the air and underwater is really very different. A simple example: during a thunderstorm, a person first sees a flash and only then hears the thunder, because even the strongest rumble takes a long time to travel. The slowest sound waves travel in gases, but the speed quadruples if you replace gases with liquids. So if a thunderstorm were taking place underwater, the fish would hear the thunder a lot faster. Also, they probably wouldn't be thrilled. As for humans, regardless of where a person is, they will hear everything late. That's how our senses work. Here, look. Dogs, like many other animals, begin to sense the approach of an earthquake before the first tremors. It's a small difference of only, 5 seconds? But sometimes even 5 seconds can save your life. However, animals that live in or near water are even better at predicting disasters. Frogs are very sensitive to changes in water chemistry and therefore can sense the approach of an earthquake several days in advance. So in 2009, in the Italian city of La Aquila, an entire colony of toads disappeared from a pond. And in 1975, in the Chinese city of Haicheng, according to witnesses, snakes began crawling out of their holes en masse a month before the major earthquake. Now that's an advanced preparation. Yes, dog seismometer is much slower, but that's not a big deal because dogs have other talents in their arsenal. It's believed that these animals can sense many serious human diseases before doctors even can find them. It's all about smell. Dogs can detect about 12 diseases from malaria to Parkinson's disease. They can predict migraines, epileptic seizures, even changes in blood sugar levels. And all this by scent. Yeah, animals are amazing creatures after all. Predictions, early diagnosis. What's next? Perhaps we would live in a safer world if we learned to understand them better. But it's important not to overdo it. The town of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania has an annual Groundhog Day during which a groundhog named Phil supposedly predicts the weather.
Ladies and gentlemen, Punxsutawney Phil!
His behavior is said to tell you when spring will begin. That'd be all right. Omens can be very different, but there's one detail. The inhabitants of the town say that Phil is always the same groundhog, which predicts the weather for 180 years. The first mentions of him date back to the 19th century, and it would seem that groundhogs don't live more than 10 years. But people have an explanation for that too. Supposedly, Phil is given a special elixir of youth. What? Call me a skeptic, but a long-lived groundhog who drinks the elixir of immortality every few years is a bit much. Frankly, I'd rather believe in artificial intelligence's answers to the universe's most important question. 42. Especially since people have already tried to obtain something similar. In 1973, a computer program was developed at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to simulate global stability. And they say that most of its predictions have come true. I don't know how true this information is, but anyway, the program promises us the end of the world in 2040 because of population growth and industrial development. Well, it won't be long now. Stay tuned.
2040, 2050, civilized life as we know it on this planet will cease to exist.
See you later.